PETERMAX is a designer of spaces. His most recent project was the Powder Room and Manny's in Austin, Texas. He's worked with major hospitality groups across the country, like ARIA, MGM, the Light Group, Starwood, and is a total badass. I really enjoyed my conversation with him, and I hope you guys do too.
What do you do for work? Do you say
I think
designer,
it's tough
artist?
because yeah, when you say designer, it's like I hate the term interior designer because it just quickly puts you in this very weird box. But designer, you could be a graphic designer, a fashion designer. My background is architecture. I've never had a standard 9 to 5. I really never went into architecture. I understood that field to be very regimented and almost like a necessary evil to get to do my art. We hire architects. I'm not downgrading the field of architecture. It's just changed so much from the old understanding of like the master builder. And now it's almost like they're legal draftsmen. And like the word I hate more than anything is decorator. Because that just immediately is like, picking pillows. I swear to God, I'm horrible at doing that. There's some people that are fantastic at doing that and the layering and all that. But so that was a convoluted way to say I say I'm a designer of spaces.
Designer of spaces. The other word you used in that I would have described you as is you're an artist. The way I interpret your behavior, the way you talk to people, the way you express yourself. We've never talked about this before, but you just referred to yourself as an artist, and I agree with that description. How would you define artist?
I think in my experience, we have budgets, we have schedules. So that's where we really differ from a painter, right? Or a sculptor.
Well, they have budgets and schedules too. Like when Michelangelo was working on the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that, but I think, a true artist is like they're just out there to show the world their art, right? So I worked in different facets of the design world, working with developers, working with, more corporate clients. I end up gravitating towards working with groups like Lobos,
right?
Where they're like, hey, we have a vision. We don't know what that means. We've seen cool things that you've done. So help us figure out what that actually means.
Right.
Versus, hey, can you do a cool facade? Put a Chanel logo on it. Hey, you know what? Chanel didn't bite. Let's drop a Montclair logo on it. Yeah, but the building.
Right.
The building's so cool. I've had a lot of those experiences. What I've come back to is what drives me and feeds me. Taking a seed and slowly over time, watering it and then pruning it. I'm a huge fan of, I love bonsai because it's just like, the tree stays this big, but like normally it would just grow into its own thing. It's just like you manicure it to where like any concept to the exact form that you want. And that takes time.
I think that all makes sense. A way to also define an artist in my experience is when they're not able to create, they're tortured. In my experiences with you kind of like riff creatively all the time. That would be how I would define artists. It's like someone who can't help themselves, but create. I think very few people can articulate why walking into this space is so special, but everyone who does has that response. They're like, this is spectacular. This is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback just in a short amount of time. Yeah, right.
They are experiencing your art subconsciously and consciously, and they don't know every single element that you went through to put everything together, but they're basically feeling a version of you. Like you're infused in this project, like the artists of old in paintings infuse themselves in that work. And then when that work goes off on someone's wall, like that person's personality is now part of your home. If you have children, like your children will walk by that person's personality all the time, every day. It's like this insane thing. This is what people are experiencing here, even though they might just think, oh, it's a place I go drink and have fun with my friends.
Sure.
It's actually something much more profound than that.
I get asked all the time, hey, can you do my home? I want you to, you do this is so cool. I want you to do my house. And I'm like, no, thank you. There's probably a lot of money in that, and I probably should do that. But, the idea of creating an amazing palette for a couple and a family, right? I could probably get inspired in that.
You'd have to love the family.
There's something interesting about that, I suppose. But, the idea of doing hospitality, you have an effect, whether it's, big or small, but you have an effect on culture. I kind of look at it, you have like, you have 2 hours or however much time you have 2 hours to sort of like allow people to escape for those 2 hours. If you're doing it, versus like, the down the street dive bar, that's an escape too, but I think, the way I look at it more is you have this short amount of time and you can affect a large amount of people in a way that you can't really do in, like office design, or those things just don't inspire me. I think that the ability to, I think this place is going to shift Austin's culture in a way, Lobos, they're so good at,
You're part of Lobos. I think that Lobos, and with all the work you guys have done, is certainly elevating the city of Austin in a way that isn't pretentious. You guys aren't coming in here and kind of belittling what's been here. It feels like you guys are building upon the foundation of what Austin was and what makes Austin such a special city.
Yeah.
And just layering another piece of history on top of it.
What's cool about coming here, because I've done restaurants and different projects like in Manhattan, like, you know, you're doing stuff in like DC, Manhattan, the bigger cities, in Miami.
Do you want to tell me like maybe some of the highlights of your career so far?
Sure. I mean, a little bit. Some of the clients like MGM, they're always pushing the envelope. What's cool about Austin, which was when they came to me, Lobos, you know, came to me, I thought the opportunity to expand what's here. I think first time I saw what Kelly Wearstler did at the Proper, you know, I think that changed Austin in a way from from an experiential hospitality standpoint. You walk in and it's like, I haven't seen this before, right? This is cool. And,
Totally.
and it changed the landscape. Everyone was like, that was the spot. That was just Kelly doing Kelly. She's amazing, and she changed the scene here, you know? I don't think she set out to. She just does what she does, and, you know, and
She's a force of nature.
totally. I put her in the category of artists too. I mean, I think the best designer spaces, interior designers, whatever, they're really artists that have to work in the framework of budgets and, you know, and time frames and schedules. You know, and she's one of the best. But you know, there's like true icons, and she's like a living icon, you know. And there's a handful of those that are doing that stuff. But, you know, artist again. You know, I don't think it's a surprise that she comes from Hollywood. You know, it's like, I don't know that she has a set design background, but I think a lot of the best, you know, David Rockwell, some of the really big names, they come from movies.
I know that that's sort of the trajectory that you had getting into this space.
I had some influence from that world. Yeah.
Do you have a template for how you approach each space that you're going to invent?
I don't know. I don't have like a written down system or protocol or anything like that. You know, it's like a project starts. And the thing about what's fun about every project is, you know, like every project is different. Stylistically, some people are known for their style, for like, hey, if you hire this person, you're going to get that. Kelly's kind of one. But she's an anomaly because her style does spread. Kelly's not paying me to say all this, by the way. But her style, she can do this, but it always looks like her stuff. And that's a testament to just knowing herself, and like, you know, and there, you know, but what we do is I look at each concept as like in a bubble of its own. Like Scorsese has a style of movie, but they're not all the same story, right? They're not the same script, right? You have different characters, but there's a theme in his, you know. But like for this, so if you look at my history, aesthetically, there's like, I don't know that there's a theme, you know. Yeah. This was very, very different. This was very different for me.
A lot of your work that I've seen online has a lot of cool, calming, sort of natural.
Yeah, it's a bit more, yeah. I gravitate towards that. That's definitely more my personal
preference.
Taste.
Yeah.
Taste, I would say.
And so this space, the idea was not that on paper, but I think that there's like a very awesome tension between your personal taste and then you're embracing sort of like the idea of the powder room, right? And you have these amazing wood curved paneled ceilings, and you were telling me earlier that you didn't even know they were going to be this nice.
You're just seeing it in person. I'm like, that looks cooler than I had intended. That's like a moment. Yeah, they look like big fat slabs of like live edge walnut. You put it together, you draw it, you know, you have it, you know, we work in 3D a lot. So you can, I mean, we knew the space like well before, right? I mean, for the most part, like we develop it in 3D in the computer. Materiality, it's all there, and you know, if we're thorough enough, and most of the time we try to be, and we are, you could just hit 3D print and we're done. Like that's it, from concept to the final space. You know, things change, but we try to develop that pretty thoroughly. So we spend time like in the model. You're right, yeah, it's on a screen, but you're in it. You can walk around it, you can sense it. So
but my point actually was that tension, if I'm being conscious about it and I'm thinking about it, is what sort of makes this place special, because this place could have easily been way too eccentric and cheesy. Yeah. And I think you nailed sort of like the vibes of it's different. Like you walk in, there's definitely features like the leopard cheetah, you know, taxidermy animal over the bar, and the fun birds and just
all of it, to be honest. I mean, you know, I think in every project you have to push the boundaries of your own comfort. I mean, I was nervous a lot about this during the process of this.
You were?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, are these lights going to feel like you're in some sort of like, you know, techno dance club, or you know, like this, was it going to feel too, you know, warehouse party? But you when you go through the process, it's like you constantly turning the dial constantly turning the dial to what I have in my head, so I could stay away from that.
Right.
You know, if that makes sense. Well, for a while we didn't have our lights like set the way we wanted, and they were purple and green and blue. I was really nervous.
Yeah.
You know, but then once we actually got everything set, I was like, it came out better than I had intended, or I had in my head at least. You know, the goal is there, but like you never really know.
It's an amazing feeling. And yes, congratulations, because the feedback has been tremendous and you're just wonderful. I can't wait to see the next thing that you do here with Lobos, which is going to be called the Austin Sports Club.
Yeah, excited about that.
Yeah, so stoked. You mentioned to me that you grew up in South Dakota.
Yeah, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A small town, really.
Your kind of artistic inclination, do you remember when that started or when you started getting into it?
Yeah, I mean, I have to credit a lot to my father moved to Aspen, Colorado when I was about 4 years old. So I would go out there, you know, but he was a real estate broker that eventually became a real estate developer, spec home developer. So that world kind of entails everything, right? From finding the land to hiring the architect, designing it, and then he was a general contractor, so he would build it, and then going back to the front portion of being the broker, so he would then go back and sell it. I saw 100 projects go through over his desk. I was exposed to the creative process and then seeing it. I worked as a contractor, like, you know, a laborer and then a framer during those years, just as side jobs. You know, during college, I took a year off. Having those experiences was interesting to see. Just like, you know, it's not all pretty. It's actually mostly dirty, grimy. You know, construction is painful. It's not fun. Mostly it's not fun, right? It's not a fun process. You have to have like a stomach for like the patience for it, because it's like moves really slow. Because in my mind, I'm like, everything you're doing, I've already had in my head for a year or two. Waiting for those details to show up is just a test of patience. Being around that totally inspired me. You know, I'd see, just working as a contractor, I'd see 2 Range Rovers pull up, everyone pulling out of their car like in black slacks. I'm like, who are these guys? Oh, they're the architects. Everyone else is covered in drywall, mud, and paint. You know, they're all contractors and they're builders. And they walk in, they point their fingers, they leave, and then we end up doing what they want for the next 4 days because maybe the owners are coming in or whatever. That's a cool position. So, you know, that's interesting. So you make all the decisions and everyone just kind of follows your lead. So yeah, so that's what led me in to go to get my degree in architecture, which was an interesting, it was a fun process. I liked school, was okay, but I couldn't wait to get out and just do it.
So before you got to what you're doing now, you did have a foray in set design for film, right?
No. So I lived in LA after college for about 5 years, and I would just go to different places, right? Getting invited to different places, and all of a sudden I'm realizing there's a thread that this one guy was doing some of the coolest stuff in LA. Like every spot that you would hear about. I lived in Manhattan Beach, so like to go into Hollywood or wherever, you know, it was like a journey, right? You're gonna go, and I would end up going back to these one designer space. I didn't even know that was like a job. Like, oh, like, yeah, right. I guess somebody has to put this together. I've never seen anything like this. Just do off the wall stuff. Fast forward 5 years, I had done a bunch of stuff. I was flipping real estate, buying and flipping real estate myself. And that was like right out of college. I just jumped right into it. High design, low cost, high value, low cost design. Cause like, hey, you have $50,000 over a project. Like, how do you spend it? Right. You don't put 45 of it into something that's like not going to be impactful. Right. And then 2008 hit. And like basically my whole, it just stopped. And I threw my bags back on, my construction bags. And I was literally I was remodeling people's houses. I would design them and I was like, I'd hire a couple other super like people. And we would like, I was building stuff again at like 28. And I was like, this is a,
it felt like whiplash.
What a setback. Yeah. You know, I had to drive my fancy sports car that I was driving like back to the dealership and here's your lease back. Sorry. You know, so it was like totally, you know, a very humbling experience. So for like a year, I was like, what am I going to do? And I ended up getting a phone call from a contractor. And he said, hey, do you know this guy? And he's a designer. Like, how do you know him? Like, you're a contractor. What's your connection? He's here. He wants to meet on this one hotel project. So fast forward probably 3 months later, I'm the head of his development company, development and design side of things. So he was buying a hotel, launching a hotel brand. His background was set design. And so there was just I learned so many tricks that I don't even like, I just picked up on through osmosis. it was just all this, he was this guy.
Yeah.
He would look at everything through the eyes of a lens. And that taught me a lot. Every frame that you turn your head is a moment to seek balance, seek composition. I mean, like right now behind you, there's like, I can just see the balance of that wall. The same as over here, so it taught me a lot about the feeling that I think the intended design moment is trying to get across. And then there's like, well, to do that, you need to do this. Right. So it's like, yeah. He taught me high level thinking. It's a high school dropout, this guy. He didn't have any training. He just understood what looked good on camera and then transposed it into a full design career.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty fascinating. He taught me a lot about lighting, and it wasn't like, hey, here's how you do this. It was like, hey, push that light back a little further because you really want that up glow, or you want this or this or this and this. And you hear that 500 times over, you just log it all. Right. Yeah. So there's so many things that I see that most people are not going to see it.
Do you get agitated when you're in a space that isn't right?
You know what? I used to. I've done so many projects. I know how difficult they are. I know how difficult it is to build a small house. Take from the lowest level of difficulty, even the lowest level is difficult. It's a challenge, right? It's just hard to do. You really like to be committed to doing, unless it's in my mind, like on par with what I would do. I don't critique anyone's work anymore, because I'm like, I know how challenging it is. They did their best. They probably had budget restraints. You never know. Like maybe they had 5 months to do it. No one knows that, and no one cares.
Right.
When you have the time and the money, right? It's always time, money, budget. Those are the three, and they always say pick two. That is the game, right?
Did you have all three for this one?
No. I mean, some projects really do just have budget, and some of them are, they have a lot of time. And I've been super fortunate to get clients that they strive for all three, and it's like the gauges on the DJ mixer, like you just can't have all of them all up, right? In order to do this, sometimes you got to bring this one down, and it's always this balance. You strive for an 8 maybe on all three of those. I think that kind of is what sets a good designer apart from someone who doesn't have the experience to know, like, hey, that's going to be too much, and you're not going to get much out of the value of that, like visually. Hold off, don't do that. And Lobos, Grace, Jason, and Eric, they have enough experience where it's just common sense to them. Sure. Like I could say, Jason, that's cool. It's going to be too much. I don't think you're getting much value. He's like, I got it. Grace, same. So they all have a very, very solid understanding just due to their experience. Like worth it, not worth it. And that's where you collectively come to those decisions.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Yeah,
it's been
amazing.
Wonderful.
And being here for as much time as I have over the last few months and working alongside these guys has been great.
And now you're gonna come here more often, maybe live here more.
I love Austin. What a cool city.
It'd be so sick to have you here. So for this venue, your process was unique. Can you kind of walk me through how you kind of thought about the space and how you came up with how to start thinking about it and feeling your way through it?
I mean, really just from the beginning, right? I get a cold call from Jason. It was initially for another concept, right? And I think it's because I had done a lot of like Latin American, Mexican restaurants. One of my first clients was just a well-known brand, huge volume, high design.
Was this Javier's?
Javier's. So yeah, like right, when you get exposure for that, like other people, like I want that. And it's a little bit bittersweet because kind of over it, right? Like I've done that style, but I keep getting asked to do this. But I understand that. And the ironic part is I've been asked like over and over, like, hey, we want like a Tulum style, right? That's like a big vacation hotspot. And over the last 10 years, it's exploded. And, I've turned down so many Tulum style projects. Some of them are worth it. Some of them are not. I just did one in New York like a year and a half ago. It turned out great. But I even told the client, he's got 100 restaurants. I mean, he's a very prolific guy. He's like, I know, I get it. I think in Manhattan it's just so different. It works. And I'm like, I buy that. Let's do it. Around the time that we were opening, like 3 Tulum style restaurants within a month opened in New York. So it's like things trend. I think become popular in culture, and then it happens. I think you need to stay ahead of those things. So I was kind of known for that. And that's a style I just understand, and I get that. What I do like about that style is you get a lot of organic, it's like the organic, natural materials that you have, highly textural, rough plasters. Like, just it feels good. It's like, you know, kind of of another era, another building style.
Sure.
So I like, I mean, it's just personally like that style. So Jason calls and says, here's what I'm thinking for this concept, which was Mexican concept that just has been moved due to finding the right location. This one came up first. It's kind of like an 80s style Miami bar. You know, that was just a loose framework. And we started putting images together and kind of getting like a feel for it. And it was received well. And then you have to actually do it. You actually have to start laying it out and putting it together. There's so much latent psychology of just the human brain. You know, that's why when people call me a decorator, I get pissed. I'm like, no, I'm trying to do something different, you know. But to tell this story, about a powder room was Jason came, Miami 80s, and I'm like, oh yeah, we'll do like Lamborghini doors on the wall, and like, you know, like hilarious things, neon lights, and you know. And the more I started thinking about it, I'm like, that's going to be horrible. That doesn't work at all. That's going to be cool for a night, but I'm not going back. And we were like, you know, it needs to feel like a comfortable, really comfortable place that people want to come back to. And there's nothing more comfortable than like a living room setting, a blend of like hospitality and residential. For this is not my normal style of design. The colors are different than anything I normally would do. The lighting is a little bit different. Sometimes what I do is I believe design entirely is storytelling, and we've spoken about how all the similarities of film. In my mind, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? There's that journey, there's that experience. If you're thoughtful about it, you draw people in. So in order to do that, in my mind, like thoughtfully, we created a story. There was this Cuban couple living in Miami, like in the 80s, right? That was their heyday. I think Jason and my stories differ a little bit. He's got his, I've got mine. They were like in their 30s, in their heyday, Miami. They had their magic down there. They had nightclubs that were popular down there. So they kind of knew the business. You know, the scene in Griselda.
It's the name of the Netflix show. I haven't seen it yet.
So there's a scene where she goes up into a crazy seedy nightclub. And it's in Miami. And it's like dirty. It's kind of scary, you know. And like that was in my mind, like that was kind of what they had there, and it was too much. It was getting too hot for them. So they're like, you know what, we're going to calm down. We're going to move out, and we're going to bring some of our family. We're going to move out to Austin, Texas. So you had this like wild couple. I named them Rocky and Dominique, and she's tall brunette, you know, flowy curly hair, just like beautiful model type, you know, and Rocky's the Miami guy, the silk shirt, you know, unbuttoned down to here, gold chains, white slacks, just Mr. Miami, right? So that was them. They move out, and they're like, okay, after a year, they're like, we want to do something here. Like, you know what this place is missing? It's like what we had there, but let's do it a little bit more calm. So where the concept kind of comes into play was this was theirs, and they're like, we don't want the attention that we had there. You don't want the people, the big line out front, all that. Why don't we give it to some family come out? Why don't we give it to one of our like nieces or nephews? Right? So they had a close relationship. They were the crazy aunt and uncle, and their little niece, Manuela, they're like, she's perfect. She's 25. She's looking to, what does she do with her life? She's been asking. Let her do whatever she wants up front. So that's it. So basically, through those characters, all the decisions kind of come in, right? So Dominique is like, hey, you know what I want? I want like cool, curvy, very feminine you know, sultry. So that's where the red comes from. And then he's more gaudy and obnoxious. So he's like his, you know, gold chain. So that's where you see like the gold coming in, you know, and I could just picture the conversation.
His hair coming out of his shirt.
All of it. Yes. I mean, to be honest, the main guy that actually did all the millwork, his name is Lino. I'm like, this is the guy. His mustache is like this. But I just picture, you know, the conversation between them, you know, like, hey, well, Rocky, you know, we have to do like really curvy boots, very sensual, very like, you know, smooth and like comfortable. He's like, okay, we'll do that, but it's got to be a party. We're going to put an amazing sound system in, and I want to do this wild light system in here, and, you know, we're going to put a stuffed leopard in the back, like growling at the crowd. Like, that's kind of Rocky's personality in my mind. And then for Manny, right, so then you have Manny. What are you going to do? It wasn't like, hey, what do I want that to be? What does Manny want that to be? Like, what color would Manny paint those walls? The decisions almost come from them, and then it's just like, it's like they're kind of the muse, and they just... It's easier because it's not my style, like my natural style. I mean, yes, of course it is, but it's like I let those decisions kind of come through these characters. I don't develop them that greatly, but it still helps set the tone.
Inform, yeah. I mean, when someone walks into this space and they love it, and they obviously consciously aren't aware of everything you just said, but it subconsciously hits them, when they come in here and they love the experience.
That's kind of like just a real stripped down, but that is like the story for this. And I've done that for other projects, but that's the fun part is developing that story.
Yeah. By the way, you talked about sort of that moment where you lost a lot and you had to return your sports car in 2008. Most successful people I know have those humbling moments, and without them, they don't live as fulfilled of a life. Those are absolutely necessary moments, it seems, in people's lives, and without those failures.
Well, I fast forwarded over the part of that story where I worked for free for this guy for a year.
Wow.
In my mind, I'm like, hey, some people went to Harvard and paid to go to school or trained for, that was my education. So when I started my own thing in 2015, I immediately had the best clients right away because I did that year working with him, and then the subsequent 4 or 5 years that I worked with him, it just elevated my status to the point of when I was like, hey, I'm doing my own thing now.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, let's do this.
That's an amazing lesson for people, actually.
It was massive. It was massive. It was massive. And it was humbling, very humbling too. Because, in your 20s, the world's your oyster. You're kind of just confident, stupidly confident, which you need to be. I think you need to be. But then sometimes things happen and bring you down to earth, and you're like, you got to figure out how to make this happen. So getting that opportunity to work with this individual, and he was a mentor during that time, big time. And he just elevated oh, this is what things can be. This is what you can do. And sometimes you're not even aware.
I think there's a culture, especially of young people, who expect when they're learning and being mentored that they should be highly compensated immediately.
Absolutely. You see that today.
And that's really toxic. And a lot of people don't get to form mastery because of that. What your experience shows is sometimes how necessary it is to make those sacrifices in your career and maybe work for free for someone in order to elevate yourself to that level of mastery.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of to elaborate on that a little bit, the amount of humility that it was to drive a car that I shouldn't have bought, couldn't afford, but did. I was 26, and to drive it back, I was embarrassed to drive it around because the world was coming down, and I was like, I'm done with this. That taught me a lot of just that shit doesn't matter, right? That stuff doesn't matter. To create. Because what I love to do is just working with guys like Jason, Grace, and Eric. I love it. It's so much fun. I get goosebumps just thinking about that creative process. It's such a blast.
That's what matters.
And the other stuff was easily recognized for me to be just a lot of bullshit.
One of the things you mentioned earlier too, when you were talking about this space, was that you had this idea for this super out there concept, and you had to kind of shape it like the tree. You had to kind of trim it down and figure out where it was going. And one of the things you said was you wanted to make sure people wanted to keep coming back. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge, probably the biggest thing in hospitality is figuring out how to make a place punch and then also be timeless, right? It should fit, this place should work in 20 years from now, 40 years from now. I don't think it's common. I think a lot of people who design spaces fail to do this.
Well, I love that topic, to be honest. Timeless is a word that means a lot to me, and that easily translates into the conversation of design trends, which is every industry has a trend, especially in the creative side of things, right? The first time I ever saw The Office, Ricky Gervais' Office, I didn't realize until the third episode. I'm like, what is so different? Oh, they're carrying a camera around, and it's you're just in the room with them. I had never seen that, but I didn't realize it because I'm not in that world. That style was not following a trend,
right?
And it changed everything. So just on a really basic level, you see the Pantone color of the year, and designers will post that hey, we're on top of it. If you're following a trend, you're 10 years behind. 5 years behind, and I think that the idea of creating something timeless is you have to be very cautious not to do that, because then you're remodeling it. At the end of the day, it's just then you're going to be fixing it later.
I think that's true for any art form. If you're following a trend,
Yeah.
then you're behind.
Yeah. And I also, there's a kind of a quote that I feel has a lot of weight, is like, trends follow the convicted. You can't be that convicted if you're following a trend, in anything. So trends follow the people that are like willing to take risks and do something that's, because you could fail,
Right.
And it could be like, oh yeah, did you see what they tried over there? Like that was hilarious. Like, nice try. Or they just changed the industry. Like you said, any creative endeavor, there's trends. And I think that the people that take the risks do it, right? That's inherent in the word risk. You risk, looking great or looking silly.
Yeah.
But I think the more informed you are, the more experienced you are, the less you're likely to fail. You're just gonna, you work with better clients. You work with more, people that are going to support the riskier things to come around and make sure it is successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that idea that trends follow the convicted. I haven't heard that framed that way before, but of course. And I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. I want to interview you again when we open the ASC.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll do this second interview, maybe another one in between here again, just kind of maybe track the sort of how this is all going. I did think it was funny that when I brought up to you and Jason earlier that it would be fun to do a Cheers type episode, that you immediately had a response that was like, have you seen the set? Like, you were familiar with the Cheers set and how it was built.
It's fascinating to me. I grew up on that show. The characters were like, just like every one of them, they had like this, just a great show, right? So then to see it from I think that picture was just a still, and it was just showing the audience, and the thing was like, oh yeah, the bar is tiny, and it's just like the stuff on the wall, and the audience, and the cameras are all in front. Yeah, it was just a comical thing to see something that I've watched forever, and you just don't realize everything that's behind the scenes. And that's just like that industry, right? It's a facade.
Any industry, really.
Yeah.
Like we were looking over here earlier, and the camera was pointing that way, and you're like,
The back of the house.
back of the house. We don't want people to see the back of the house.
Yeah.
And I think that's true even in technology. There's a
totally
back
true.
of the house concept, of people pretending like technology works, and it's just people kind of fixing it or like kind of running it on their own often.
Yeah. Right. Or like the average everyday user of like their iPhone doesn't realize there's like millions of hours of code that go into that.
Exactly.
It's just like you only really, and the same thing. I think that's a good transition into like, you and I spoke a little bit about like, why do people feel good in certain spaces? The human psychology of spaces. It was like one of the original art forms, right? It wasn't an art form in the beginning, right? It was like the need for shelter is inherent.
We've lost that as a society.
That was like the first use of a space, right? It's a necessity. So like, whether it be like, a cave, the transition from like necessity to opulence, or like beyond just necessity, right? So like a shack, like a tiki hut shack or whatever, right? It serves its purpose. It's stopping the rain, it's potentially keeping you warm and all this stuff. But it's super rooted in just human psychology and the need for survival. If on one side of the spectrum is walking down a dark alley, well, what's the opposite of that? If you're looking at it from a spatial standpoint, like, well, what's the opposite of that? Like, how do you make someone feel so comfortable in a space? Like, what does that mean? And I think it has everything to do with just your own human innate need for comfort, security, right? So you take those things into account. I heard Jason say earlier, he was talking about how he likes to look at everything from a floor plan, like a diamond. You have energy nodes. Sure. So there's this inherent energy node. So when you walk into a room, that's like a node of energy, right? That's your actual first experience into the space. In this space specifically, we have a DJ booth, we have a bar, we have the restrooms over there, we have the entry. Those are all moments of energy. And it just, the way the space laid out, we did that intentionally. It's balanced. It's very, very balanced. So like you have people kind of going this way, you have people coming in. So you always have movement. And I think when you break it down to the technical side of how, is that intentional? Oh, for sure. And you guys were talking about the round bar. I love a round bar. It's annoying for the bartenders. It's annoying for the equipment. I mean, it's like there's reasons to not do it. But what you get, I was here, we were here last night. You can stand over here and you're having interaction with the people over there, whether you realize it or not. So this becomes a real energy node that way, right? But having that balance is super key. And then you kind of like you start breaking the floor plan down, and you're like, okay, well, this is a little bit of an odd corner, or we have to make it amazing. So the balance is you're always balancing the room, so there's nothing awkward. Back to human psychology. One thing I learned from working during that time, you never want a dead end in a space. Just think about what happens when you're walking in a room full of people, You know, everyone has anxiety.
Yeah.
Everyone has like personal like feelings of awkwardness. Maybe you don't.
I definitely do. I definitely do.
You know, maybe you don't know anyone in the bar. Your friends haven't shown up yet. And the last thing you want to do is like walk to the end of a room and then have to turn around and walk back, right? You just don't want that. You always want a way out. And that's not space planning. That's just like basic psychology, right? Just like the gangster always wants the booth that faces the door so he knows who's coming in. I took a class in Feng Shui in college, and I was like, after the third class, I'm like, this is just common sense. You know, you don't put your bed against the door so when someone comes in, you're startled. Like that makes sense, you know, but there's a reason that it's like one of the longest standing, you know, traditions in that culture because it works, but it's all based on, you know.
Yeah. Do you have a theory on, and you may not even agree with this thesis, but I would make the argument that this is the first time in human history where we seem to become overwhelmingly wealthier, like as a society.
Yeah, small groups are becoming wealthier.
Right. Well, in the West for sure.
Yeah.
But like our architecture, our spaces are becoming uglier.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. You look at, you know, European culture and you walk through the streets of Europe. I studied abroad in Italy, and it's like the cafe on the corner has more going on. Yeah, maybe not like the chairs, right? But the building, and it's like, it's so phenomenal. And you're humbled in the
presence
because of the history, right? So much, it's like you just realize like you're actually just in this one moment because that thing has been here for hundreds of years, and you're just like the sliver in the time. You know, here it's like more about us, right? I think over there you can't ignore that you're just part of a longer story, which is there's a lot of gravity to that.
Well, hopefully this will be one of those places that in 100 years someone's sitting in this place and they're feeling the gravity of the story that put this place together.
To expand on that, I mean, I think here people and buildings, you know, it's driven by budget, you know, and it's like the craftsmen that existed back then, which was like you would have like a bigger part of the population, just like that was their job, right? That's like what a lot of people do. Like no one does this stuff anymore. Yeah. So to get the craftsmen to do great stuff is really expensive.
Well, not to get too obsessed about this issue, I agree that's probably one of the major factors. Also, regulations. There's so much bureaucracy now. There's so many rules having to do with vendors and time frames, and also handicap access.
Yeah, like the pan thing passes any code today in our building centers. Like no.
Right.
You know?
And if you go to new European cities, so European cities that have been built after World War II, you know, after places were bombed, a lot of them are not as nice. Yeah. And they're not as beautiful. And I think that it's because of regulations. And it's because of government intrusion.
Yeah. But and that has a lot to do with, you know, the you know, litigious nature of like especially Western culture, you know, that's why codes exist, right? So everyone's covering their ass. Right. And that's why they exist. And you just, how far can you take that before like you just, you know, your parameters are so tight that you're just so limited.
Yeah. Well, dude, I could talk to you for a long time. This is a blast. Yeah. We will have you back if you'll have us. You represent what our show is. So where madness lies. Yeah. Is a quote from Don Quixote. Right. And when you were talking about conviction, being the leader, like being sort of the leader of trends. Yeah. And even though they might face insane amounts of derision, people who are convicted are called insane until they actually complete their tasks.
Yeah, you're crazy until you do it, right?
And then everyone else
That's what they say. It's like you're only crazy until you actually do it.
And the very people who called you crazy, are they going to be the first to kind of try to get into your circles after?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like just on that, you know, I don't think that truly creative people who are the ones like I kind of still like the convicted, they're not out for it for that reason. They're just doing it. Yeah. Well, also they don't want to. I think copying other people is can't help it, right?
It's coming out of you.
People are gonna say this looks like something else, which doesn't bother me unless I don't like the project. But you know, but I don't think the people that are really like creating the trends, really like people that end up in industry follows them. I don't think that that's their intent.
Well, dude, congrats on this. This is special, and really appreciate this. I'm gonna go. My wife is gonna kill me if I don't run over to the house. But
how many times did you call, dude?
You're the man.
Yeah, thanks.